You're in your own apartment, quiet streets, a car ride with a friend, places that we trust will be safe until they're not. You're home alone, or so you thought. Your fear of monsters under your bed become real. Strangers scratching on your front door at night. Fluorescent lights buzzing over a locked door, and then a red smear across the glass that you don't want explained. These are near misses. These are the true stories that stopped one step short of a crime scene, and the people who lived to tell us how close it really came. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. You might know me from my true crime channel, Kimbyrleigha. I am Kimbyrleigha, or Kimbyr, and this is Candidly Kimbyr. On this channel, we'll be diving into some of the most creepy and interesting real-life stories from around the web, mostly focusing on one of my favorite places, and that is Reddit. And today, we're going to be exploring near-miss stories that quite possibly could have turned into full true crime documentaries, which I think I know just a little bit about. But these stories are about people that realize after the fact how dangerous something really was. This first one is from the Let's Not Meet subreddit. A lot of them are. It's called Strange Uber Ride, and it was by poster Just Marie. Now, this kind of reminds me of stories we've done before, but it goes like this. And they say that this one's fairly tame, but I'm going to say we'll be the judge of that. It starts about 3-ish years ago. I was out with a girlfriend celebrating Cinco de Mayo. My husband had to work early the following day, so he did not come along. At around 2 a.m., I called an Uber to go home. Oh, and like I said, Uber horror stories. We've been there, done that, seen that before. But let's keep going. She said, I had been using the service by then for several years and had never had an issue. Lucky you. I'm pretty friendly, so initially, the driver's questions didn't really sound any alarms. He asked stuff like, why are you alone? Aren't you married? Where's your husband? I felt fairly confident that he would back off once I confirmed I was married. As we were driving down a fairly desolate stretch of road, he started to drive really slowly. At this point, I was beginning to feel uneasy. There was no other cars, no reason to reduce speed. He noticed that I was keeping my eyes on him when he looked back through the rearview mirror. He suddenly stopped the car and got out. I immediately unbuckled my seatbelt and jumped out of the car too, and I just yelled, "What the F are you doing?" He mumbled something under his breath along the lines of, I thought I heard my tire. You didn't hear the tire? And I was saying to myself, hear a tire? She said, I was like, no, you should never just get out of the car. And the strange thing is, he didn't even wig out that I had just exited this vehicle. He got back in, ready to complete the ride. At this point, my options were 1, get back in without buckling in and keeping my hand on the lock handle, or 2, stay on the side of this desolate road alone at 2-something a.m. and wait for another car to pick me up. I chose option 1, as I pretended to call my husband, who was totally sleeping, to let him know I was 10 minutes away. This next part is where it surprisingly takes an odder turn. As I'm riding, desperate to be dropped off at home, police sirens start going off behind us. The driver panics. He looks through the mirror and starts going on about how the warrants they have are false and how his license should be valid and it's not his fault if it isn't. The cops ask him to step out, realize he's in the middle of a ride, so they ask me to step out too. They search him and his car and arrest him on the spot and take him to jail. His license was also expired for 2 years. WTF, Uber? I asked why they pulled him over and they tell me, turn without a signal. I asked them if they'd drive me home and they told me they weren't a taxi service. By then I was on a much more vibrant street with well-lit sidewalks, called another Uber to take me home. Night ended without incident. So creepy Uber driver and rude cops who wouldn't escort a woman home past 2 a.m. in the morning, let's not meet. And by the way, there's actually a trend going around, and if I find a video, I'll definitely put it in here, but women are now making sure before they actually close the door of an Uber that the child locks are not enabled. So they open the door, they lock it, they pull the handle, and they make sure it unlocks, and then they get in, which I think are smart. But commenter Sneaky Sears said, absolutely nothing tame about this. This could have ended a lot worse. It also highlights huge issues with those alleged checks that Uber does before someone can drive for them. The guy didn't only have an expired license, he also had an outstanding warrant, but somehow he was still having a car registered in his name and all of that. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he definitely wasn't looking at his tire when he got out. Your reaction surprised him, and he decided he didn't want the confrontation. Also, the police's reaction is gross. They indeed are not a taxi service, but they literally just arrested someone who was able to get around the biggest ride-sharing app's background checks while you were in the car with this person. And they want you to just call another Uber, hoping that this time it's not going to be someone with an outstanding warrant. It seems like more people in the comments were really mad at the police officers, and I get it. I understand they're not a taxi service like the person said, but you would think they would help you out in a time like this. But maybe they're not allowed? I guess tell me in the comments what you thought. One comment that I thought was worth reading said, I had something similar happen to me with a super angry cop who pulled over my Uber driver for running a red light. He sped up and got through it while it was yellow. I leaned forward to watch the light when he charged forward. I had to climb over the unconscious drunk co-passenger, drag her out of the car, and hold her propped against my shoulder as I thought we could continue the ride after the ticket was written. Nope. The officer got angry that we were hanging around. I pointed out there were no other Lyft cars available, and we couldn't get another Uber unless he let the driver use his phone to end the ride. The cop said we could find a taxi. I pointed out that this was an Uber, a pool ride with a complete stranger who was too drunk to tell me her address. We were also in a neighborhood too far north of any nightlife to find another cab at 3:30 a.m., let alone 2. After 15 to 20 minutes, a cab driver on his way home for the night passed. He would only take one of us, and the drunk woman woke up enough to give him an address. I walked 2 miles towards home until another cab driver, also on his way home for the night, saw me and offered me a ride for free. He thought I had no money for fare. He wouldn't let me pay fare because he was so angry to hear why. I was walking alone at 4 a.m. That's actually really nice of that person. They did not have any reason to do that other than probably, like you said, thinking they felt bad for you in your entire situation. But Uber's bad enough. Uber Pool, I didn't even know they still had that where you ride with strangers. That would be a hard no for me. Maybe I'm just way too paranoid. But the title of this next one is just odd. It's He Pretended to Be My Dog. Also from the Let's Not Meet subreddit from poster Flax and Flare. The poster begins with a little bit of context, and if you know me, I love context. She said, before I start, here's a bit of context to my story. My husband and I live in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the side of the house, which opens up into the laundry room. When we're too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook his collar onto a long line that's attached to one of the pipes on the corner of our house, so he can use the bathroom. We used to do this from the door in our laundry room, but we noticed the large step from the door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting him go out through the front door instead, since the porch is much closer to the ground. This particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight when I decided to let him outside one last time before going to bed. I hook him up to his line, close the door, and lock it before heading into the kitchen to put away some dishes. It was pretty routine. Even if he used the bathroom quickly, he liked to walk around the front and side of the house for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door. How my dog signals he wants to come inside, so I head over to let him back in. Oh my God, I'm already scared. This could go so many ways, but remember the title. Since I've watched way too many scary movies, I always look through the door's peephole before opening the door. Out of habit, I look to check that my dog is in front of the door. Instead, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. What? I would be terrified. She said, I freeze with my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch. This one louder than the last. This kind of wakes me up from my initial shock, and I run to grab my cell phone. I call my husband to tell him what's happening, and he's very confused. I probably wasn't explaining the situation very well, but says that he's heading home. Now I can imagine something like, babe, there's a man, he's acting like the dog. There's a dog, a man dog, he's scratching. Help. Yeah, that would be pretty confusing. But she said, this is when I realized my dog is still outside with this person. I head back to the front door, trying to make a little noise as possible to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed, looking at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as possible. I can't see my dog anywhere, and the side of my house is covered in gravel. I knew I couldn't step outside without making a lot of noise. I'm like, don't go out there, girl. Don't. She continues. With my heart still pounding in my chest, I go to the front door to keep my eye on the stranger and to get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel like they would take me seriously since all this man was doing was standing in front of my house. I tried taking a picture of him with my cell phone, but my camera was only able to take a picture of the peephole and not the images behind the glass. All of a sudden, the man looks up directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me, then opens his mouth to show this taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few seconds. With that, he turns around and starts to walk down the street. I stay in the same place, almost expecting him to rush back and start pounding on the door. Luckily, my husband got back after a few minutes. Long story short, he convinced me to call the police, and we went out looking for our dog. It turns out this man had cut the end of the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided this was a good time for him to explore my neighbor's backyard, which was where we found him. It's been 3 years since this happened. We've since moved to a newer house, unrelated reasons, and the police weren't able to come up with any suspects. Ever since then, we take our dog on a very long walk before the sun goes down. And I have to say, yikes. First of all, he did more than just stand outside of your front door, but I'm glad the police at the very least tried to find out who did it. This is exactly why it's so important to have a doorbell camera or some kind of camera in your house, around your yard, outside. You never know. And that way, you don't even have to go near the door. If it alerts you that someone's out there, you can look from your phone, figure out if you should call the police right then and there. Commenter, it's me, Patty, made a really good point. They said, he had a knife to cut your pup loose. Thank goodness that's all he did to Doggy. Good thing you looked out before opening the door. Smart thinking. Stay safe. Yeah, that's another point. He had a knife or other sharp instrument. He essentially put your dog in harm's way as well, and he could have gotten hit by a car. He could have gotten stolen. But as a commenter said, you could have been hurt or worse, so I see why this was a near miss and almost became a true crime documentary. Now, another person jokingly said, I'm skeptical. I think the dog cut the line and pretended to be a human so he could get more walks. Tricky little bastard. Now, it is sometimes a relief to laugh when a story didn't have a horrific ending, but I'm sure the poster wasn't laughing when she was living it. Now, coincidentally, a poster with the name Purple Paw said for him to know how your dog signals to be let in meant that he had been observing your house for a little while to see a clear routine. I wouldn't be surprised if he also knew that you would be home alone at that time. Sheesh, that's creepy. I'm so glad nothing happened to you or the dog. Take care. Yeah, me too. I'm glad that it didn't escalate further and that your dog, didn't get hurt, or that you didn't have a doggy door, because after some of the things I've heard about people trying to break in through the dog door or even sticking weapons inside, it is so scary. But speaking of creepy people and being home alone, or at least thinking you are, this next one is called Stranger Under My Bed by the poster Myra. And already, you already know where this is going. She wrote, I'm 22, and this incident happened a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my first apartment and was in the process of moving in. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed, so I was going to the entrance of my apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment, sat on my bed while opening the mail while using the phone, and I dropped the phone on the floor, and it landed under the bed. So I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened, and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face. And he didn't see me. So trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone, said, sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just going to take a shower, and I'll call you back. And I'm thinking, run, please tell me you ran. She said the bathroom is right by my bed. So I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, jumped out of my window, my apartment is on the first floor, and called the police. And I'm like, thank God. that she got the F out of there. And pretending she was taking a shower was clever, but I don't think I would have the patience. She went on to say, they told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone came out of the door to the apartment complex. This was during summer, and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend, and he came to me just before the police. I gave them my keys. They went inside, and only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house, I was a mess, shivering and crying, told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives, waiting for me to come out. Wow. She explained that this man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. Thanks for reading. I just wanted to share my story so that others might know what to do in a situation like this. The police told me that what I did was truly amazing and rational. If I would have screamed, this could have ended really badly for me. Thank you all for your kind words. I never expected this kind of response. And I'm thinking, wow, I mean, she was just moving in. The poor thing, I can imagine, you're getting settled in. This is a new place. And then you come to find out there's a creepy man under your bed. The top comment is something that I can resonate with. They said, geez, like I needed a reason to compulsively check under my bed at age 31, right? And I get beds that don't have an underneath for this reason, I swear. Now, truth be told, it doesn't come in handy when one of your AirPods gently rolls right underneath and you can't really reach it without a broom handle, but no one will be hiding under there. There's not enough room, right? It's just like this much room, maybe not even a foot. But one commenter, to my point, said, my mom acted like I was irrational for preferring a bed with no space underneath it back when she was willing to buy me a new box spring under the condition that I also got a bed frame. Exactly. And in response, someone wrote, murderer, walks into your room and it's like, damn it, there's no space underneath their bed. And while he's standing there completely confused and not sure what to do next, you attack him from behind, unless he hides somewhere else. I did think it was funny that one woman said this is exactly why she has clutter stored underneath her bed. Her husband doesn't know it, but she's still scared of what could be underneath. Or maybe it's just an excuse to be messy. I wouldn't judge, but in all seriousness, many commenters were so glad that she got away without being harmed. What was this guy's intention? Imagine that she did lay down on that bed later and he came out from underneath armed with that knife. I would be playing the what if game all day long if I were her. Like, what if I hadn't dropped my phone? It's life's little inconveniences that can sometimes be a blessing in disguise. Just remember that. This next one is entitled Road Trip Story, West Texas Near Miss. Definitely sounds like a horror movie plot and kind of revisits the stories I've done about rest stops. A little bit of the same vibe, but worse. The poster said, I was on a cross-country road trip with a colleague. We were driving through West Texas on a major highway. In the area where we were, even a major highway was pretty desolate. There had been a truck stop or a gas station about every 100 miles, and every one of them was solitary with no other buildings in sight. These weren't really towns, these exits. They were just places to get more gas to get to the next gas station. It was pretty late at night, and she had been driving for like 4 hours. I usually can drive for about 8 before I'm tired. I go on frequent road trips. But she could only manage 4 or 5 before it was my turn again. We were also getting low on gas. At a quarter a tank, and you learn this from road travel to fill up when you get the chance. So she was looking for a gas station as we drove along. It's really corny, but we were talking about fate and destiny and some other weird shit at the time. The kind of conversation that gets me keyed up and worried. So I was trying to change the subject. She took an exit while we were talking, and I got out my coffee mug so I could fill up for my turn of driving. We pulled into a typical Nowhereville gas station, just the station and a trailer out back. I assume, thinking back, it was probably where the people who owned it lived. There was another car parked in front of the doors off to one side. We got out, still talking, and walked up to the double doors, each of us grabbing a door handle, and the doors were locked. I turned and looked around to see if there was a sign. Sometimes places will put up, back in 5 minutes, and I noticed several things in succession. The coffee maker inside was halfway done brewing a fresh pot of coffee. The monitors that showed the store were visible from outside where we were, but all of them were showing static. And there was a splash of bright red on the door in the back of the place, which was closed. I suddenly realized I was looking at a huge streak of blood with handprints in it. Wow. Now, way to go for attention to detail, though, taking in all those clues in seconds. She went on to say, every hair on my neck stood up. My friend began shaking the door and yelling, "We need to get gas!" But I had already turned and walked away from the doors. Poor friend. She was oblivious, I guess. The poster told her friend, "We have to leave now," and grabbed her arm and started propelling her back to the car. She explained, "Now I noticed the other car in the lot. It had no plates. It was dingy and had dents, and there was an empty gun rack in the window of it. I ran to the car, dragging her with me. She seemed to take forever to open her door and get in. She had the key still. The whole time she kept saying, 'But we need gas.' While I tried to explain to her, there is blood in there. Blood." After what seemed like a year, she pulled the car out, and when we were backing up, I saw through the windows that the back door in the gas station was opening. We had pulled away before anyone came out, thankfully. I freaked out, and so we were 20 miles down the highway. I tried to call the police, but had no signal. I didn't get a phone signal until we had driven about 40 miles and got to a truck stop. Again, not in a town. Just a building on its own in the middle of nothingness. I called the cops. They thanked me, and I never heard anything more about it. To this day, I feel like if I hadn't freaked out, we probably would have met the robber or whoever was in the back room of that place. I also wish I'd been able to find out what the hell had happened in there. It was a Chevron station somewhere in the western part of Texas, at least within about 100 miles or so of the signs for those places on Route 10. So my brain, Kimbyr's brain, goes to maybe something non-fatal. I'm a mom of two, so I think of things like, I don't know, a woman going into labor early or something like that. Maybe running to a gas station for help. The baby's coming out. She puts her hand on the window. And maybe it's not really blood. At least not blood from someone getting murdered. Or it could be something else like an injured employee. Maybe they fell on the job or something and they had to leave, so they closed the door. But didn't they say that someone snuck out the back? So that's kind of frightening. And I think all of us know what blood looks like, so they probably did see blood. Many of the commenters wanted, of course, to find out if this was a true story. They wanted the information from the poster, but they couldn't find any. But one person theorized it could have been self-inflicted. They suggested taking a look at Google Maps and stuff. It looks like the kind of place some people go to just disappear. From your description, it seems like whoever was in there had locked themselves inside rather than having had somebody else bust in on them. I just read a somewhat depressing article about how people will often look for beautiful or desolate places to off themselves. The Mount Fuji in Japan or Mount Rainier, where rangers are actually trained to look for signs of people who are trying to commit self-inflicted things when they come to that park. So I was going to say, it could be. Seems a little less likely. Other people were theorizing, like this one poster that deleted their account but said creepy as hell. There's a possibility that the owner of the place was just a good old boy who decided to close shop for a couple hours to go shoot some deer, and you just seen the aftermath of him coming back after gutting it. The mind isn't great at making these kinds of connections in scenarios like this, though. And that's what I was kind of going with. Like, maybe we're thinking it was a murder, but it could be something rational, right? Like, we can explain it away. But the original poster said, totally. I knew there was blood, and I didn't want to find out at the time what from. Okay, one last story also from Texas, coincidentally. It's called When Not to Pull Over for the Police, from poster Warm Fuzzy Puppies. She wrote, "This happened to my aunt and uncle in the early 80s or so. They were living in Austin, Texas, and had attended a party in a neighboring area. They were driving back very late, and at one point were driving along a very long, completely deserted stretch of road, bordered by woods and brush on one side. No houses, no streetlights, no other cars on the road, nothing. Until my uncle, who's driving, notices a car coming up behind them, which then speeds up and gets very close. My aunt and uncle start talking about how weird this guy is. They can see it's just one man driving, since there's no reason to tailgate on an empty road in the middle of the night, and then the guy speeds up even more and pulls up alongside them in the other lane. He starts yelling at them to pull over and is flashing what looks like a police badge. See, and in the 80s or even the 90s, you don't have a phone. You can't just call 911 just in case and make sure it's an officer. If there's no lights and sirens, though, don't pull over. Or pull over, but then don't open your window or get out of the car and then call 911. The poster went on to say, my uncle starts to slow down to pull over and my aunt absolutely freaks out and tells him not to. She's really creeped out that this guy who's driving a car that has no police markings and no flashing lights pulls up to them out of nowhere and is now trying to get them to pull over by just flashing a badge. While they argue about whether to pull over or not, the man in the other car is getting more and more angry, yelling at them to pull over, beeping his horn and flashing the badge, saying he's the police. My aunt starts crying. My uncle says, fine. If the guy's really a cop and they need to stop for him, they'll stop when they reach the next populated area or business, which will be a while. But they reason that if he's really a cop, he would have to understand their point of view. My aunt and uncle keep wavering between worried that this guy is out of his mind and worried if it's a real cop that they're going to be in big trouble for not pulling over when told. Finally, they see a gas station up ahead and plan to stop there. That's also a good piece of advice. Pull over in a populated area if possible. She said, as soon as they pulled into the station, the cop speeds off, never to be seen again by them. They didn't think to try to get his license plate number at the time, and they were just thoroughly creeped out. They drove the rest of the way home without incident. But oh no, the story doesn't end there. It gets much, much worse. A few months later, on the exact same stretch of road, a man is rescued who tells a horrifying story, which is then big news in Austin. Fake cop, flashing a badge, beeping his horn, etc., had gotten this man, who was driving at night with his girlfriend on the same road, to pull over. And once pulled over, the fake cop forced the man and his girlfriend out of the car by gunpoint, maybe. I'm not sure all the details at this point. My aunt refused to read too much about the story back then because she was so freaked out. And my uncle doesn't remember everything in detail. And into the woods on the side of the road, he ties the man and his girlfriend to separate trees facing each other, and then does horrible things to both, ultimately killing the woman while the other is forced to watch just a few feet away. I'm not sure how the man ended up eventually getting rescued, but it was long after fake cop was gone. Either someone must have found the man tied there or he got loose and found help. They never caught the fake cop murderer. That could have been my aunt and uncle that night if they would have pulled their car over like my uncle wanted and started to do. My aunt always ends the story with, and that's why my husband always has to listen to me. So, okay, there was some humor at the end, but this could have been way worse. And I always tell you that I won't share a story unless I truly have something similar to add. And after the comments, if you want to stay, you can hear something that happened to me. But the top comment was from Ralphie Boy, and it was, I forgot where I read or heard this, but in a situation like that, you can call 911 and tell them that you're being told to pull over by someone who you aren't sure if they're a cop or not. You can tell them you'll pull over as soon as you get to a populated area like your aunt and uncle did. Not sure if it's true or not, but it seems to make sense to me. And I was going to say, yeah, but this wasn't present day. We're talking about the 80s, and we're so lucky now to have modern technology, but we didn't back then. And there was one comment I felt like addressing because I do understand there are laws in different states, right? But when you are in an emergency, some of those laws do not apply. Okay, if you're operating a motor vehicle, you have to do it in a safe manner. Everybody knows that who drives. Of course, that's important. But if it's your life on the line, it's going to come second to make sure you're not doing something wrong, like being on your phone. Because this poster said that it was illegal to operate a mobile phone while you were driving. And they wondered if they did it to call from your phone, to tell them a cop was trying to pull you over, if they would get in trouble. And I have to say, my friend, if your life is in peril, that supersedes a phone call that's going to, be against the law while you're driving. You just go ahead and say, hey, I had to call 911. Even if you get a ticket, let's just say you get a ticket. That's way better than getting killed. And another commenter said, I would have pulled over and then waited for him to get out, get closer, and then drive off if this dude does not look anything like a cop. And that's true. They need to have an official badge, they need to have a number, and they should also have an official ID with their face on it. And usually you can tell when they come up to your window, they're going to have the accessories on them. In California, that's usually a taser and a gun and the official uniform. But what if in my case, you're a young 15-year-old who just started driving with a learner's permit? And I have to admit, I was not driving with a full-blown license at the time, and I was driving after hours because when you're 15 in Florida at the time, you can drive, but you can only drive like a couple hours, or then you have to be accompanied by someone that has a license. My grandmother, who I lived with, didn't feel like driving me back and forth to my friends' houses, and I definitely overstayed my curfew that night. I think it was about midnight when I left, but I was only driving maybe 10 minutes away. I was a fairly new driver, of course. This was the 90s. I didn't have a cell phone. And I had no clue because I was naive that criminals, bad people, they can pull a ruse on you where they try to get you to pull over. And now I know better. But here's this guy. It's the middle of the night. It's dark. He pulls up next to me at a red light. He's mouthing something. He's pointing to my tires. He's telling me to roll down my window. And when I did, he said, "Your tire, it's flat. You need to pull over." And I was scared. I didn't want to get in trouble for messing up my grandma's car. So I did. I pulled over. It was right in front of some condos. I'll never forget it. And it was only about 2 minutes from my house. This guy gets out of his car. And I already know at this point, like, I effed up. Because he was on drugs. He was as high as a kite. His eyes were wide. He was tweaking out. He was talking really fast. Really scary. And then he was making comments about my looks. He was calling me baby. He was like, "Hey, baby, you want to have some fun together?" And he was touching himself. It was gross. And then he asked me if I wanted to partake in some party favors in the form of white powder. And I'm 15. But I had to think on my feet in that moment. I did look older for my age. And he asked me if I wanted to come party. And I said, "Oh, that sounds like fun. But this is my friend's car. And I took it without asking, so I better go drop it back off before she notices and then calls the police." So I said, "Why don't you just give me your phone number and then you can come get me?" And you guys, it worked. I could have been in real danger. And I don't know, maybe because he was high out of his mind. He gets a pen out of his glove box. He writes down his number on something in my car. But instead of driving to my house on my normal route, hell no. I took a huge detour. It took me a good 15 minutes to actually get home into my neighborhood. I just didn't want this guy to be following me because who knows what his intentions were. I wasn't going to wait around to find out. But I think that these kind of stories scare me the most because you never know what could have happened. What could have happened with that guy pretending to be a dog outside that girl's door? What could that blood have been from on that window of a gas station? What was it that was happening in the situation with this cop trying to pull over that aunt and uncle that night? Was he trying to, violate the woman, hurt both of them? It sounds like a movie I've seen once that I really didn't like. I think it's called Strangers. I don't know. If you don't like horror movies, don't look it up. But it's when couples are killed together, which is just horrifying. Having one person watch someone in peril, it's sick. But there you have it. Near-miss horror stories that could have been true crime stories. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I will be back very soon with more stories. I'll see you then. Bye.